All right. Well, this is episode 1, and I'm super excited to be finally doing this. It's been something that you guys have requested for longer than I care to admit. And there was a brief interlude in the beginning of the year where I did start a podcast, and then things happened and I had to focus more on the basics of business rather than adding things in. And now we're here. And I'm super excited to be moving through so many of the amazing topics that have been sent to me. And today, we're going to be diving into the topic of identity and purpose. And I wanted to start with this because it's, I believe, how everything can start if we want to really create transformation. It's also the very first pillar inside Lovely Radical Academy. And it's in many ways the thing that so many of us don't stop to do, is to work out our identity and our purpose. And now there's so many rabbit holes that I could go down with this topic. And so we're going to start with something that I start with inside LRA, which is was inspired by the movie The Lion King. And I think it's Rafiki who says to, I think it's the Mufasa in the clouds. And he's like, remember who you are. And he says it to Simba as a man, to remember who he is, who he was born into this world to be, but maybe he's forgotten along the way or pushed aside along the way because other things seemed more important or was running from problems of the past. Who can relate? And so that beautiful moment in that movie really solidified the importance of our identity. And rather than the buzzwords in so much of self-development and spirituality these days about finding my purpose and finding myself, and it can get a little bit annoying thinking that we have to find something in us or outside of us as if it's lost, when really it's always there. But perhaps we've just never taken the time to really be present with ourselves, to really learn who we are, who we came here as before life and experiences and programs and, whatever it is got piled on top of us, trauma. And so we, I believe, are all born with a purpose. We're all born in as these beautiful, clear, energetic containers. And for no one's fault, we learn different things along the way, and we pick up different belief systems and programs from people who are just doing the best that they can with the resources that they had, because of their programs that were passed on to them in the exact same way. And it's only in recent years that we're really coming into this awareness of how powerful we are and how much more we can do and be and create. And it can be that quite uncomfortable awakening that we have when we realize that there's more. We realize what we might be capable. We realize that maybe we've just been running on autopilot or running in fight or flight or running away from something for so long that we actually have no idea where we want to go, could go, need to go. And we don't know how to get there because we've not taken the time to create a solid foundation of who's even going there. Does this make sense? So my question is, can you start to ask yourself better questions? So we're really great at asking all the questions about why things aren't working, about what we're doing wrong. But could we start to ask ourselves some new kinds of questions to bring ourselves into this present moment with ourselves, with our body, with our mind, with our environment, with our reality that we're currently in? Like, putting aside the past and everything that might have gone wrong or might have happened, putting aside the future that we get anxiety about, because anxiety only exists in the future, aside for a moment, and just coming into present and going, who am I? I feel like, really, who am I? Who am I when everything else is taken away in this moment, without the partner, without the kids, without technology, without the job, without the things that we accumulate? Who am I when everything else is not there? Who am I when things are going really well? Who am I when things aren't going really well? And why? Why am I like this? Why am I like this when things are going well? Why am I like this when things aren't going well? Like, do you remember a time when you were really like in love with who you were and how things were going? And what was different then internally than where you're at now, potentially not feeling that great? And this is something that can be utilized over and over and over again, is coming back to like, who am I right now? Because while there's the buzz theme out there of needing to find a purpose and find who you are, you actually already know. And this is what I do with my clients all the time. Like, people come to coaches or come to programs or experiences wanting someone else to help them find something that feels like it's outside of ourselves. But what real work is finding it within ourselves, because you already have all the answers. And I believe, and my experience is, the mark of a great coach or guide or teacher is not to give you something, not to tell you something that you are, but to help you find the answer within yourself. And a lot of the times it is unconscious. We rule 95% of our life and create 95% of our life from our unconscious programs. And so a lot of the times we, as the ones who are moving through the experience consciously from that 5%, aren't actually able to put a finger on what the problem might be. And someone external who is able to pick up the language, the stories that we might be telling, the certain behaviors or limiting beliefs that might be clearly coming through from that end. When we can pick that out, it's makes it easier to move through it. And so asking more questions of ourselves to actually start to come into that presence and go, well, what triggers me and why? What offends me and why? What excites me and why? What am I great at? What have I achieved up until now? Can you start to see that these are questions that aren't pulling into the past? They're also not projecting into a future, but it's just like, who am I? Because the commonality that I see is that so many of us, and we're not taught this, have just rushed through life and done the same thing that we've watched parents do, watched teachers do, maybe along the way watched friends do, even watched mentors and coaches do. And it's great to model behaviors if they're in the towards motion of where we want to go. However, if we're just constantly on that treadmill, and then something gets taken away from us, like a partner, or someone passes away, or we lose a job, or whatever it is that happens, we lose our health, and we have a stripped back to, wait, who am I? That's where all of these labels can come in, because we start to feel so disassociated and all over the place because we haven't got a solid foundation of who we actually are. And so we don't find ourselves. We don't find our purpose. We actually get to decide and design who that is and what that is. And it will constantly be evolving and changing. aside from the program that most of us who are in this space have grown up with, of, you go to school, you get the job, you get the house, you get the dog, you get the partner, you get the babies, and you just do things in this set experience, and you pick the career, and then that's your career for the rest of your life. We're not living in a world that really has that happening anymore. And so again, when that's the unconscious program, and then externally people are seeing people traveling the world, or having lots of money, or having multiple houses, or having better health than them, or having an amazing relationship, and they're like all over the place, being pulled from this old program to this new possibility, but with no stability of self. That's where mental health comes in, and we get all these labels put on us from being disassociated and scattered, when really we can bring it back to what is our identity. What do we want it to be? What are we going to decide to become from what's past to lead to what we want? And you get to decide it, you get to design it, you get to do that every single day. And with this awareness of self, everything can begin to elevate and transform. And you get to actually start designing a better life. And this is how it works. So when you create that solid foundation of your identity, who do you want to be? And this can actually start with, who do you not want to be? A lot of the times we learn what we want from what we know that we don't want. And that's why I talk about it all the time. The most horrible experiences in our life actually show us what we want, which leads to us getting that. And so the sooner we can actually come into gratitude for the worst things that have happened, the sooner we actually catapult ourselves to the outcome that we really want. But we learn who we are a lot out of who we don't want to be. And that identity piece is the most powerful piece. And then, so I break this into 3 parts. I do this a lot inside the programs. And those of you who are in LRA know this. I go on and on and on about it. And it's so fun. It always comes back to identity. Is deciding who that is, deciding who we want to be, deciding how we want to show up, deciding how we want to be when things are going well, when things aren't going well, when we're offended, when we're triggered, because triggers are like the terrible things that happen, the breadcrumbs, the stepping stones to getting to where you want. Because in order to get an outcome that you've never experienced, whether it's wealth, whether it's health, whether it's an incredible relationship, whether it's whatever it is, if you've never experienced that, if no one in your life has ever experienced it, you cannot get there as the current version of yourself. Otherwise, you already have it. If we're already energetically aligned with all the things that we want, we'd already have them. We usually have to become a different version of ourselves to align with the experience that we've never had before. And so building that identity, deciding who that is, designing who that is, constantly doing something every single day that moves us into a new state of being, a new frequency, a new energetic alignment, is also then going to communicate with your reticular activating system, which finds evidence of what you're choosing to focus on unconsciously in the world. You start to see, oh, that's interesting. That person just offered me an opportunity. That door leads to this. That person just mentioned this. And you start to realize that you're being led towards the ultimate outcome. So identity is the first piece. The second piece is communication. And this is one of the pillars inside the academy as well, where we learn effective communication, beautiful communication. And without that solid foundation of who we are and what we actually want, the outcome that we really want, down to the specifics. And I've tasked you guys in this group, especially before, with that, is how specific can you get about what you want, knowing that it's not like that old program of you decide your career and that's it forever, knowing that whatever you decide today can evolve and change, and you can add more things in. That's the fun of it. But learning to communicate who you are, learning to communicate what you want, learning to communicate what that can look like with other people involved, with colleagues, with friends, with an ideal partner. Communicating that bravely, honestly, effectively. And then the third piece is the piece that gets a little bit mushy sometimes, and I'll tell you why. So the third piece is devotion to your identity and to that communication. Because a lot of the times what can happen, and let's use relationships as an example, you may have learned who you are, decided who you are. You may have come into a relationship with someone and communicated, these are the things that I want, these are my boundaries, these are the plans that I'm making, this is how I'd like us to work together, all the things. However, then the dopamine and the fun and the good feels and the honeymoon of the experience can start to cloud little pushes against the boundaries, or can start to brush aside any disrespect that might be coming up that's against what you communicated. But we go, oh, it's okay. Oh, it'll get better. And that piece, if we get mushy on that, that's how people lead to things falling apart and things being miscommunicated and stories being created in the mind, and the delete, distort, and generalize that our unconscious mind does. And you'll learn more about that inside LRA. And it's that piece that is the biggest opportunity for most people. And the reason that we can get so mushy in step 3 is because there's a fear of ending up back here, being alone, ending up not having the money, ending up being sick again. That if we stand by our values, that we might lose this thing in front of us because we stood by our values, that we might end up back at square one. Except by standing in the values, you command respect. By standing in the values, you create a solid foundation in the environment that you're in, be it the relationship, the job, what have you. So you've actually brought the trifecta together of, this is who I am, this is how I'm going to communicate that with those around me, and how I'm going to show up for them and show up for myself. And then I'm going to actually stick with that. I'm going to stick with it. And sometimes that may mean sacrifice or releasing a relationship if it's not lining up with the things that you've communicated. Sometimes it might be releasing a job or releasing friends. If it's not lining up with who you've decided you want to be and become, how you've effectively communicated that, and then devoted yourself to that. And remembering it can change. However, knowing what you want, knowing what your values are, knowing what you don't want as well. If you start to see it over here, some of the things that you don't want, some of the things that don't align with the communication that you've shared, then it's time to actually stand by and devote yourself to your identity. And it's the best thing that you can do for yourself, but also for others. So much of the time we can drag jobs out, relationships out, friendships out that aren't serving either person, but we're clinging to it because of the feelings, because of the good feels that usually ever aren't as great as they were in the beginning stage. And that's what Lovely Radical really has become over the years, is that integration of the light, the fun feeling of your identity, the fun communication and those big dopamine hits, and the dark, the challenging stuff, the devotion to what we want, even if that means saying no to a quick hit, saying no to something that feels great right now, and is showing some warning signs perhaps. And so I know for myself, it was many, many years of doing all of the work and all of the courses and all of the programs and the experiences and the woo-woo stuff to realize that, yes, we can do all the fun, feel-good stuff. We can have all those quick hits if we want to. And the lessons will repeat themselves until we're willing to face off with them. Whether you go into a new relationship, a new friendship, a new job, unless we've actually decided and designed and continue to decide and design who we are and who we want to become and what we want to achieve in this lifetime that we have on this rock flying through a universe, and we don't know why and we don't know for how long. Just a reminder. See, the dog's agreeing. If you can hear that. Unless we do that, we're going to just keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And so creating that solid foundation of identity, continuing to evolve it and design it and decide it every single day, communicating that well and learning how to effectively communicate and what you need and what could potentially prevent you from effectively communicating, like the triggers and the unconscious programs and the limiting beliefs that we have running. Once we can bring those to the light from the darkness and know them and integrate them, it's so much easier to step into that devotion piece. That's step 3. And for me, this has become beautifully clear in this past year, really devoting myself to, so those of you who have followed for a while know that I devoted myself to a year of self-love. So it was just focusing on the identity piece, the communication piece, and the devotion piece to myself. So no, parties, no dating, no, all the things. And it's been incredible because it's really allowed me to notice how much fluff there was in self-development and how much of the really good, quick hit feel good stuff there is. And it's great. And don't get me wrong, love some crystals and sage. And until we also choose to face the polarity, the polar opposite, the negative emotions, the limiting beliefs, the darkness that's within each and every one of us, and learn how to integrate them, that's when the communication of the devotion pieces really connect. And so could you choose to devote a few months to working on you, on deciding and designing your identity, on what your next step of purpose is? And it could just be that. Is it okay that you get to actually decide your purpose and it can change? The amount of purposes I've had over the last 20 years, the amount of businesses I've attempted to start, the amount of jobs that I've done, the companies that I've worked for, the projects that I've done on the side is insane. And they all felt like purpose. And it changed. And it evolved. And interestingly enough, and I've learned this from a lot of my mentors and coaches around the world, is that all of those things that you've learned up until now, all of the great experiences, the negative experiences, the different jobs you've done, the different relationships you've been in, is all piecing together so much knowledge and wisdom that can, if you like, come together and integrate into one beautiful purpose that has so many different parts in it. And that's how beautiful we are as humans. We're so diverse and so multifaceted and so capable of so much. And so many humans are just stuck in the unconscious, day in, day out, what my parents did, what other people are doing, story and program, that we don't actually take a minute to decide who we are. And we can make these excuses about, the job's more important, the kids are more important, my partner's more important, my parents are more important, whatever it is. And I would argue that the opposite is true. Because how much better could you show up for them and anyone when you've created a solid foundation for yourself so that you know who you are, you love who you are, you're excited about where you're going, you know where you're going, you know how you're going to get there. Even if you don't know how you're going to get there, you know that you can start to recognize the opportunities and take them because you know you have that solidness in yourself, even when things don't work out, because you know that no matter what you do, as long as you know who you want to become and you keep working on that, that you'll actually be led there. And how much greater of a foundation of a partner is that, of a mother or a father is that, of a parent is that, of a colleague, of a boss, of a leader. So can you choose to actually devote a few months to working on you in whichever way that looks like? Maybe removing the substances, maybe removing any humans that you don't actually need to use as distractions. No complaining, no blaming, no focusing on the problems, and instead choosing to focus on something more, something better, because what we focus on grows. And I'm wondering what you too could uncover when you decide to design your own identity and finally start living as the person that you were born to be. And remember who you are. Thanks for tuning into this episode. It's been really fun. And I'd love you all to ask yourself that question. What could happen if I chose to do things differently now?